Welcome to Shop Talk, presented by ShowChic, where they always put the rider in first place.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. Excuse my attire, but I just came from. We just had a chef meeting for the Nations Cup, so it's just been flat out all the time, and that ended like half an hour ago. So, anyways, I'm going to try to give you a little bit of my background and then how I got to where I am now, and then what I'm doing in my new job as development coach. So I grew up in Denmark, and are you Danish? Yeah. Okay.
Which is not too far from Copenhagen.
Okay. So I grew up in Copenhagen early on, and I just was born obsessed with horses. I don't know why, because nobody else in my family was, but I was determined that I was gonna ride. And so I ended up going to a riding school in Denmark. They have a lot of riding schools, and it's not crazy expensive, and they all have a lot of school horses and stuff, which is one thing we were missing here a little bit to get an early start. So anyways, I was able to just work off lessons by cleaning stalls there on the weekends, and then I would get one group lesson a week. So that's how I started there. And I did that for a couple of years, and then my dad, who was a policeman, he got a job as like a leader over a very small police station of 7 guys. So he was the sheriff of this island. And so we all moved to this island called Møn. So you might know that. So I moved there, and it was an island with about 10,000 people, but lots of horses, but mostly work horses. So I just started knocking on doors and asked if I could ride their work horses. So my pony was 17 hands. So most of the horses I rode very early on were huge work horses, and no saddles, just bareback pads, and usually rope for reins and that sort of thing. But I learned a lot because I came off a lot, and I just had to figure out how to make it work. And of course they were so strong, and so I had to figure out how to make them do what I wanted without force, because that wouldn't work. So anyway, so that was sort of my start down there. And while I was there, I got a job after school to work at a place where they had trotters, and that was quite big in Denmark. And so I learned to drive, and I had to start all the babies, and so I did a lot of long lining, and that has come in very handy for ever since. So now all my horses, when I work piaffe dressage, I always start them in long lines, and I find that really useful. And because it's very similar to the riding, because you still have the connection to the bit, and instead of your legs, you have the whip as a driving aid. And to me, that carries over to riding very easily, compared to, I find, the work in hand. That's a little harder to transfer over, I think, directly to the riding. But anyways, I also got a license to drive on the track, so I did that for not very long, but for a little bit, just in amateur races, and that was fun and exciting at that time. And I also rode jumpers and competed a little bit, but just at a low level. And at that point, I was really not that interested in dressage, but in Denmark, it's sort of something you have to do, because they don't really let you jump or do any of that unless you do the good basic dressage. So I learned to do good basics, but not anything beyond second level when I was in Denmark. And then I hate the cold, and so I always knew I was going to move somewhere warm, either California, Florida, or Spain. Those were my 3 options that I had in my mind, because I knew I was not staying in the cold weather. And so I was I think I was 18 plus, and I had an opportunity to come to California because a girlfriend had left several years before that and kept in touch. And she said, you can stay with us if you want to come over. But I didn't have a job or anything, so I just basically bought a one-way ticket to California. and I figured if it doesn't work, I'll just go back. You know, that was sort of my philosophy. And pretty much as soon as I got there, I saw there was a lecture that Hilda Gurney was giving at a high school, and I had heard she was an Olympian, and so I thought, you know, she would know where I could maybe get a job. And so I went there, and she told me about a place called Bell Canyon Equestrian Center nearby, near LA, and she said that was like the place in Southern California at the time for dressage, and that I should go there and see if I could get a job there. So I went there and again just knocked on the door and see if I could get a job, and they said, yeah, you can, but we can't pay you. And I said, okay, I'll take it. And then, because I knew I could work hard and that hopefully that they would find it worth paying me eventually. And so I just started there as grooming and doing whatever. And in the beginning, they didn't have me ride, so they didn't know I could ride. And it wasn't that I was that good, it was just the standard at that time in the US was very, very low. And so eventually they put me on a horse and decided that I was pretty good, and so pretty soon I was riding 10 horses a day, and I was just riding all day long. And they started paying me, so that was good. And 2 years later, the manager who was there left, and maybe it was 3 years later probably. Also, keeping in mind when I came, I spoke very, very little English. So the first year I was like very, very, very quiet, and eventually.
Can you tell us like what the years are that all of this is happening?
Well, then I would have to tell you how old I was.
Well, no, it's okay.
No, it's fine. Yeah, it was, I want to say I got here in 1980, I think, okay. Right in there. Yeah, and then probably 2 or 3 years later, yeah, in California, yeah, exactly. No, it's okay.
I got it in 79.
Oh, is that right? Okay, okay. But anyway, so 2 to 3 years later, the board of directors that ran the equestrian center. So this equestrian center had 110 horses, and it was a beautiful place and pretty new. But it was sort of owned by the homeowners in this gated community of about 300 homes. And all the different homeowners had a different idea of what should be happening at the equestrian center, so that made it a little bit challenging. But anyways, after maybe close to 3 years, they asked me to manage it after the other manager left. So I was like all of 23 or thereabouts when I was running a place with 110 horses and about 6 male employees. So that was probably the hardest couple of years of my life doing that. That was really challenging. And I had to run a horse show every month, 2 arena, 2-day show every single month was what they had been doing. They also had the team training and all that happening there. And again, that was when the standard in the US was very, very low. But everything kind of happened at that place. It was before all the big places were built, like the LA Equestrian Center and all that. So anyway, so I did that for a couple of years, and during that time I was not able to ride very much because I was just really, really busy, trying to do that. So after about 2 years of doing that, I didn't want to do that anymore because I wasn't riding and it was extremely stressful. But I asked if I could stay on there and as a trainer. Not that I was qualified as a trainer, but again, standard was low, and I had been riding up till the point that I managed, been riding about 10 horses a day and was teaching and all that. But anyway, so I started, back as a trainer there. And then I decided that I was going to try to make money selling horses, which turned out to be that I'm the worst person on earth to sell horses. But it turned out very well for me because I never could sell anything, so I ended up with them, and I ended up having some great horses to ride that nobody else wanted to buy. So the first horse that came over in consignment to be sold turned out to be a horse that had absolutely no gaits. I mean, it was like all 3 gaits were like this big. But it had a really good temperament, and it was like first level when it came. And one of my students bought him because he had such a good temperament, and she just wanted something sane and safe. But then she became pregnant 3 years in a row. And so she ended up leaving she rode the horse for maybe 6 months, and then she left the horse in training with me. And so it ended up being 4 years that she was having children, and during that time I trained him to Grand Prix. And it was just totally the blind leading the blind, because I had never trained a horse past second level or third level maybe at that time. So it was not easy, but he did have a great temperament, and we did make it to Grand Prix, and I did compete him quite a lot, and it gave me just so much mileage at that level. And I always say when I'm working with the youngsters, I said, ride whatever you can get to ride, and if you can, get to ride at a higher level, even if the horse doesn't have a lot of talent, I mean, just getting that experience is incredibly valuable. Because if I had gotten my best horse first, I would have never been able to have that kind of success if I hadn't had the other one first to put the miles on. And he was very forgiving, even though he didn't know anything, but you could make mistakes and it was okay. So during the same time, I brought over another horse in a partnership with somebody, and it was a huge, big, gangly 5-year-old that didn't know anything. And we'd paid $10,000 for him at the time. And for 2 years I tried to sell him, but nobody wanted to have any part of him, because they didn't think they didn't think his gaits were good enough, and he turned out to be rather difficult also. I mean, he was not nearly as easy as the other one, but he was more talented. But anyway, so after 2 years I went back to my partner and I said, can I please keep him through the '92 Olympics? I mean, little did I know, of course. And he said, yeah, I could keep him through the Olympics in '92 if I paid for everything. And I said, okay. And that turned out to be my Olympic horse, Monsieur, believe it or not. But during that time he was difficult, so I spent a lot of time with him. Especially, he was very fearful of everything out and about. So I was a joke at the showgrounds in the beginning, because I was always hand walking him everywhere. But anyways, he came to really trust me 100%. And so later on, when we had our team trainings with, at that time it was Klaus Balkenhol and Harry Bolt, and they would always want to get on him once. Because for some reason he decided he didn't really want anybody else to ride him. So when other people got on him, he wasn't really naughty, but all he would do was ones. So if they picked up the canter, they could not get him to stop doing ones, and I was like, oh, I was so embarrassed, and they all looked at me like, and then I'd get on and he would just canter on, and he was just kind of like, it was like a joke for him to do that. It was quite funny. But so of course I was at that point still obligated to sell him, but at that point everybody knew that I was the only one that could ride him. So I ended up having him for life till I had to put him down when he was 35. So it's just one of those things that really felt like it was just meant to be, and he was meant to be mine. And we had 10 amazing years of Grand Prix. No, he was really a fantastic horse, but he was not easy, but he was a great horse. Starting out, so I trained him up to Grand Prix, so that was in 1990 was our first year at Grand Prix with him, and ended up third at Gladstone, and that was actually a selection for the World Equestrian Games in Stockholm. And but Betsy Steiner, she was fourth. I'm sure she remembers this. But at that time, the selectors had more say over, who would go. And I was a completely unknown from California that suddenly came in third. And so they weren't going to take a chance on me to send me to the World Games, based on that. And I was totally fine with that, because I was like, I don't really need that kind of pressure right now. So that was fine. So so Betsy ended up going on that team. But then the following year, the USET gave me a grant to go to to go to Europe and just train. And that was honestly, that was the first time I was ever like in training with somebody. Up till that point, it was like, you know, sort of borrowing a trailer to go and take a lesson once a month type of thing with Hilda Gurney. Yeah, she helped me up to that level with both of those two horses. And then once when I was third in Gladstone, that's when I got the grant to go to Europe and train with Rabine. And that was really great. Not just because he was great, but because at that time all the top Europeans, they were all there. I mean, it was amazing. You know, Kure Kirkland was there, Jan Brink was there, Louise Nathurst was there, Tina Williamson was there. Yeah, she was there. I mean, everybody who was anybody at that time in dressage, they were there. So I would just, you know, take my lesson and then I would just sit and watch everybody else. Actually, you didn't get lessons per se. It was more like everybody rode and then he would sit, Rabine would sit in the corner and give comments to everybody. And then he would get on horses here and there, especially for piaffe dressage and ones. That was sort of his thing. But I learned a ton just from watching everybody. It was a great experience, and then got to compete at all the shows all over Europe. And then, so that was 91. Actually in 91 I was there with Jane Savoy. Yes, and we actually shared an apartment at Rabine's. And at that time we would get, from USCT, you would get a grant, and then you could do whatever you want. I mean, if you wanted to spend it on expensive hotels and stay for a month, you could do that. Or you could, you know, stretch it out over 6 months, which is what I did. So I stayed in an apartment at Rabine's and just kept everything at the very lowest to get as much education as possible. And then in 92, we had the Olympic selections down in Orlando, actually, and went there. And again, I'd made it into the, whatever it was, top 12 or top 15, I can't remember. But anyways, the first day of the competition was a Friday, and next door to the showgrounds was a school. And just as I was coming around the arena, and this is a hot, spooky horse, they rang the bell, the school bell, and all the little kids came running out. I mean, literally after they had rung the bell for me to go in. So I had like the worst ride of my life with him. I mean, he was just terrified. And I think I was 11th out of 12 or something. I was second to last. And that was the first leg of the selection for the Olympic team. And the way it was set up, we had 2 back-to-back shows. So we had to do 2 tests, and then it was the average of all 4. And they would send, from that group, they would send the top 6 to Europe and then start over the fighting out for the 4 spots in Europe. So the second day of that, I had like one of the best rides of my life, and he was 3rd, which was quite amazing, you know, to go from, even that the judges would even be good with that big of a step up, but he was phenomenal. And then the second weekend I was 3rd and 4th, so I just scraped into 6th place. And then we all went to Europe, and then we had a set shows we had to go to, and we head-to-head each time, and then fight it out for the top 4 spots. And that was Robert Dover, Carol Lavelle, and Jane Savoy, and Hilda Gurney, and Michael Pollan. And then when everything was said and done over there, Hilda and Jane did not make it. So, and Jane was reserved. And then before we went to Barcelona for the Olympics, I got permission to show in Denmark, which was the first time I've ever shown, at a high level in Denmark since I grew up there. And my family had never really seen me ever compete at all. And so I was allowed, you know, from the federation to show in the show in Copenhagen, a big World Cup qualifier in front of the castle. They literally put in like the arena and everything right in front of the castle. I mean, really, really cool. They used to do that every year and build everything up around it. And the Danish rider, I don't know if any of you remember, Anne Grete Jensen, she won silver back when, well, she was the favorite to win at that time, even though that was, you know, past the time that she'd been at the top. But But anyways, I had like one of those amazing best rides of my life, and we ended up winning the World Cup qualifier there in front of a lot of top Europeans. And that was probably one of the greatest moments of my life. I mean, next to the Olympics, that was, because I'm there in front of the Danish castle. My entire family was there. And then the most bizarre thing is that, you know, the American flag goes up and they play the American anthem. I mean, the whole thing was just so, it was just really, really amazing. And the Danish princess invited me for lunch, so my mom especially was very excited. So that was an amazing experience. And then from there, we pretty much 2 weeks later went to Barcelona, and of course ended up with a bronze medal, and that was, of course, an incredible experience that certainly changed my life forever, and just really incredible. And then after that, or during that same time actually, I had gotten another horse named Lugano, and that was also just total by chance. I was on a flight home to Denmark, and this girl sat next to me, turned out to be a Danish horse journalist, freelance. And we became friends, and she said, you know, I have this really nice 4-year-old. Would you be interested in being partners? And I was like, well, I don't know. I said, I don't have any money to do that. And she said, well, come and see him. So I went to see him, and I said, yeah, he's nice, but again, I don't have money to buy a horse. And she said, well, if you'll just pay for his flight to the US, that'll be your half. And and so I couldn't turn that down. So I did that, and we wrote up a contract that at some point, if she wanted out, I could buy him out for a certain amount, which was a very, very low amount. And so I think I had him about a year, maybe, or so. And then she actually wanted to do something, and she said she would like for me to buy her out if possible. And I ended up doing it over time, but it was like $10,000. I mean, it wasn't like. And he was he was a very great horse also, and was much easier than the other one in his mind. He was a lot easier, and he ended up becoming undefeated at I-1. He pretty much won everything. And then he got to Grand Prix, and I ended up making the North American Championship with him in Maryland, and was on the team with Debbie there, and also Michael Pollan and Kathy Burnett-Velde. And we won silver there, so that was really cool. So that was kind of at the same time. So Monsieur and Lugano were competing at Grand Prix at the same time. I mean, Monsieur was towards the end, and Lugano was just coming into it. But unfortunately, Lugano didn't last so long because he had some SI problems. And so I only had 1 year, maybe a year and a half of Grand Prix with him. He could still be in work, but he couldn't do the Grand Prix level. So he ended up with one of my students that could show him like at a 4th level or so. So he was the second one that was really a great horse. And then during that time, I started getting into the judging also, and I started that in '85, so I started that way early. and I really did that more than anything for the education. And that's something I really highly recommend for everybody to do, even if it's going through the L program. I mean, it just gives you so much knowledge and also appreciation for judges. It's a very, very hard job, you know, much harder than you realize if you've never done it. It really is, and not very appreciated as a general rule. But anyway, so I started that process slowly but surely, and it is a slow process, especially if you're still competing. And then in 2006, yeah, maybe 2005, I had 2 other good FEI horses. One that I brought along from the start, his name was Escada, and he qualified for Gladstone twice. And then another horse that I took over, sadly, from a friend of mine who passed away. Her name was Carol Plow, and the horse's name was Como. And when she passed away, I ended up getting him because we'd all been friends. I've been friends with the owner, and so I ended up taking him over. And he was really a great horse. He was actually a lot like my Olympic horse. He was a lot of horse, but he was a very, very fun horse. And so in 2006, I took both of them, and actually the only season I ever spent in Florida was in 2006, because I thought I had a chance to make the World Championship with Como. And so we spent the winter down here with husband and dog and kid and 2 horses, and had a very good season. At the end of the season, I ended up 6th in the rankings for the World Championship, but didn't actually go to Gladstone at that point because he had some soundness issues. He was a little bit older, and he'd been Grand Prix for a while, and so I ended up not going. So when that happened, and he was going to be laid up, and he was older enough that I didn't want to try for 2 years later, then I really decided to go ahead with the judging more seriously, and get to the FEI level, FEI level status. And when you're doing that, you have to run all over the place. Any of you doing that? No. Yeah. Okay. So you have an idea. But anyways, to do the FEI stuff, you have to travel a lot because there are so many requirements, and you're going to judges forums around the world and all sorts of things. But you gain a tremendous amount of knowledge from that. And I started judging internationally, and I think I want to say 10 years, but I'm not even sure how long it's been. But so once I started doing that, I really couldn't compete at that level anymore, and I was okay with that. And of course, all along I was teaching all along. I mean, that since I was like 20, I've been teaching all the time. And then 4 years ago, try to speed it up a little bit. 4 years ago, I was appointed by USCF as a youth coach, assistant youth coach with George Williams. And once I did that, I pretty much decided I'm not going to be seriously competing anymore, because I was also still judging, and there were so many conflicts where you couldn't really do that. Plus I was traveling nonstop, so it's very hard to keep horses going, so you have to make some choices. And then as I was doing that, I really had to sort of make some big choices as far as the judging, if I wanted to really pursue that too. I got my 4-star status, so I could judge everything up through everything but Olympics and World Games. But I found that it was just a tremendous amount of pressure to be judging at that level. I judged the selection for the World Games 4 years ago, and I just find it a lot of pressure and a lot of anxiety coming into that, and you're judging all your friends, and you just feel like you're playing God a little bit with those decisions, and I just decided I did not want to. I want to keep judging, but I didn't want to try to go further with that, and I didn't want that to be my #1 priority. I really thought that the coaching was more rewarding, and I like really being involved with people a lot more. When you're judging, you're sitting out there in your box, but it's just a one-way communication. I love the coaching where especially when I'm coaching other coaches, and it's more of a two-way a little bit. I love that. And so anyways, for the past 4 years, I have focused on coaching, and really focused on the youth a lot. And last year, I went to Europe with one of the U25 riders, Kerrigan Gruch, but we were together with Debbie, and basically all the team riders were there. So for 2 months, and went to all the shows, and I was also selector for that too, for the World Games. And so I've just been involved on all levels pretty much. And when the position as development coach came up, I just thought I would really love to do that. And so I applied, and ended up getting the job. I found out in December, and at the end of December, and it was like 3 days later, they already had a clinic lined up for me for 3 days, because there was some reason they couldn't tell me earlier, because it hadn't been signed off from the highest ups. but they had to go ahead and plan everything. So they sent out letters to the riders saying, you're going to be in this clinic, but you'll find out who's teaching it when you get there, type of thing. It was like big secrets. But when they told me to change my flight, that I was supposed to go to California, I had a good idea that I might be the one who's going to be teaching it. But anyway, so getting the list of riders in this development clinic, there was some pretty big names in there, including Laura Graves and Adrian Lyle. I was like, oh my God. But the way the development list of riders work is that it's not age-based at all. So it could be Olympic riders, but with an upcoming horse that doesn't have the scores yet to be on the elite list. But it can also be a U25 rider, you know, with an upcoming horse. So it's a very broad spectrum, but the idea is that the riders that are on the list are riders that we have, you know, really big hopes for, that they are going to represent the US someday, or maybe already have, but on a new horse. So it's a very, very, very exciting position to be in. So basically I started doing the clinic right away, and the development training and observation clinics is actually not for riders that are already in the program. They're for riders that want to get in the program with that particular horse. So it's a way of talent searching also, for sure. And if you think you have an amazing horse and you think you're an amazing rider, you're going to apply because you want to get in that program. And for the riders that are in it, I think we have about 20 riders in it right now. And every 6 months we have reviews. Just started doing that now with a group that's been in it. And so first of all, we meet with them all and set goals for what they want to do in the coming 6 months. And then 6 months later, we meet again and then see if they've actually met those goals. And then, you know, of course, I try to stay in touch with all of them as much as I possibly can. Try to go see them, try to watch them at the shows, and I try very hard to get a relationship with them and their coach. And not all of them have coaches, but most of them do. And my goal is to be, you know, really supportive of the rider-coach team, because I can't obviously teach everybody, and that is not at all the goal. But if I can help the rider and coach get better, then I think that's sort of my job, and also make sure they have the resources that they need to be the best they can be. And they do get some financial help if they're in the program, but they also get other resources available to them. Like we had the physio, Andy Thomas. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's really phenomenal, and he can really help the riders with any kind of alignment issues and balance issues, and he evaluates them and gives them a lot of really, really good feedback. And at this level, every little thing counts. You know, our standard is really amazing. It's coming along really fast the last, 10 years, I think. But now it's just like every little detail matters. And even the riders encourage them very much to video all the time and really criticize them, be really critical of themselves, and then send it to me, and then we talk through the video. So I do a lot of that with the riders that are not real close by. And since I've been down here in Florida, once I've established the relationships with the rider coach, then sometimes I'll fill in, for example, Ann Gribbons is a good friend of mine, and we're very similar I think in our styles, and she's got students down here that she can't come down and see all the time because she lives in Orlando. So she comes down for the shows, and she'll ask me to go and help those riders in between. And sometimes she can't make it down for a show, and she'll ask me to warm him up. I mean, that's happening this weekend. I'm going to help Chris Hickey because she at least won't be here in the beginning of the show. so that I feel like if I can help support the coaches that way, and that they already have a relationship with me and they know how I teach and they know I'm not going to come in and try to do something totally different from they're doing, then you know, that's part of my job. And then you have riders that have been competing for a long time, and maybe at a certain level I try to come in and try to really motivate them to take it to the next level, because often as a professional you get so caught up in your business and making money and taking care of your clients, and then you get stuck at a certain level, and we have so many riders that are extremely talented, and if they just got a little more support behind them, then they could take it to the next level and really be serious international competitors. So anyways, any questions on anything? No, but
I'd like to know how much you guys work together, like with the young horse coach. You know, do you and Debbie and Christine and everybody get together and
we do
help, you know, get the
yes.
people that are doing the young horse program into the
we
developing do. And you know, all that.
We have a really, really fantastic relationship among us, all of us. We really do. And whenever we get together, we always we had dinner the other night because we had the size committee meeting, and I sat with Christine, and she told me about every rider and horse in her, you know, everybody she saw, and we do that all the time. We're always discussing that and talking about new talents, and Debbie and I are very, very close, and I talk to her all the time, and I go watch her teach some of the riders, and sometimes she say, can you warm that one up next week, because when you have the draw times for the show, many times you have riders going at the same time, and now we have 2 CDI arenas going at the same time, so you can't be everywhere. So it's really good that we can help each other that way, and we coach similarly enough that it's not an issue for the riders at all. And that's one of the reasons I like to go and watch her teach, because I know exactly where the issues are with each horse and rider, and so there's a lot of communication among us, absolutely. And of course with George and I for 4 years we worked together, so yeah. So I already know all the riders coming up, and hopefully a lot of the ones I worked with for the last 4 years will come up to me through the development program as they get older and get better. So yeah, I think we have an amazing communication among us, yeah, which is great. Yeah, a lot of respect too. So
I'm a non-rider horse husband.
Okay.
So take that as a frame of reference. You know, the sport is such a partnership with the horse and rider. You have these 20-some developing riders. You just said of your three great horses, they were somewhat by happenstance.
Yeah.
I mean, do you ever see a situation where you have an up-and-coming rider that if they could be matched with the right horse, they could be an international star? And how do you pair them?
Yes. I mean,
because obviously so much of this business is the patron, sponsor, and all that sort of thing, and personalities. But how can you match the talent of the horse and the talent of the rider?
Yeah, if I could answer that just like that, I would do really well. It's very, very, I mean, it is very difficult, because we actually have a lot of really, really fantastic riders that don't have horses that are quite good enough for that next level. I mean, even you would think somebody like Laura Graves, you know, #1 in the world and amazing, amazing rider, you would think she would have a lineup of horses, but she doesn't. And it's quite amazing, you know.
It is, because
yeah.
You know, we've been coming down for 30 years.
Yeah.
And you see a certain rider excel because they got the horse.
Yeah.
And then 3 or 4 years later, you don't see
yeah,
them anymore.
no, that's exactly right.
Now, in Europe, do they do it slightly different, because you see the same stars year after year after year? Or are they just part of the family that's so wealthy that they...
I think in some cases, I mean, like Isabel Vert, she's had the same sponsor forever,
Right.
but she has also made all those horses. And that is something that we certainly, when I say we, I mean Debbie and I, would love to see more of our really top riders not just focus on 1 or 2 horses, but really have, you know, young horses coming up behind them. So, because now the made horses are crazy expensive, you know, but we really need our top riders to make their own too, at the same time as they're competing their top horses. And I would love to see more partnerships between breeders and riders. And I think that's very possible. That, but we still have to figure out exactly how. I mean, we want the riders to go directly to the breeders and try to work out partnerships on their own. But I'd like to see them do more of that. There's no reason that we should really be involved in that. But I think the riders have to be a little more proactive that way. But I wish our riders were more excited about training young horses, you know, because that is our best partnerships are the ones that have been from the start up. I mean, you take again Laura Graves. I mean, they had that horse since she was a foal. And the very, very best partnerships in the world, I think, are the ones that are like that from the start. They're not horses that have been bought. You know, we've seen a lot of people try to buy horses and try to make it onto the team, but it really hasn't. I don't know that it's ever happened, honestly. But and Adrian has, you know, she didn't train the stallion all the way from the start, but she trained him quite a ways. And Duval that she has now, that she's been very successful, they've had since he was 5. And he was actually bred here by Harmony's sport horses. So he's an American bred horse that they bought there. But yeah, that is definitely, it is definitely an issue, and it's something we really have to figure out how that's possible. But I think the only way it's going to work, I think, is if the riders are willing to start more young horses, and I mean, buy really good young horses, but then they got to train them up, because the made horses are just too expensive now. I mean, it's really, really difficult. So yes, you're right. It's definitely an issue.
Have, you know, years of experience, and it, you know, once you lose your horse, you can't go out and compete on their own. I mean,
no, but that's why you've got to have something coming up. Yeah. And even, you know, I think it's not so difficult to make partnerships with people if you start with a younger horse. So you have somebody to help pay expenses, but if you're not looking at a huge investment to start with, I think it's very doable. But it's something we really need to encourage our riders to do. I'd love to see all our top riders have at least a couple coming up, you know. But yeah. Yeah.
Well,
okay.
I was just saying, you know, it's such a fascinating journey, and I would want to hear, you know, one of your most special Olympic memories, because that's just, you know, I assume that that's like such a, as you said, special thing. So there must be something, you know, a memorable thing. And then, of course, having trained with Herbert Raybon, there must be a special memory from that. So that would be kind of.
I mean, I think with Raybon, it wasn't one special memory. It was just that whole experience of being able to watch all these amazing riders every day. That was huge. I learned a lot from watching, so I learned so much from that. And the Olympics, I think, standing on the podium was pretty mind-blowing. It really was, because we really hadn't even expected that at all. So that was fantastic. And I don't think the U.S. had a medal for about 25 years, so winning a bronze was a really big deal for us. So that was the most special, for sure. And then walking into the opening ceremonies, that was also really like hair-raising. It really was, when you hear the crowd and stuff. That was amazing too. And I came into it sort of as a, you know, I didn't have as much pressure as, like Carol Lavelle had the most pressure, you know, because she had really been doing really, really well. So I have to say I wasn't as nervous there. as I thought I would be, but we'd been through so much to make the team that it was always like, you know, you just had to scrape on to the next level. So that prepared us really well for being at the Olympics. So I have to say, I really enjoyed every minute there. I was just so happy to be there, and I really never expected we were going to get a medal. And becoming friends with so many of the other riders. So I told you I was with Carol Lavelle, Michael Pollan, and Robert, and they all had their spouses there. So we didn't do a lot together. They all kind of did their own thing a little bit. And so I ended up hanging out with the British team, and because they were the most fun. And Carl Hester, number one, because he's like the best stand-up comedian you'll ever meet. So it was Carl Hester and Emile Fari, and a girl named Laura, I can't remember her last name. Sadly, she passed away a few years ago. But so I spent a lot of time with Emile and Carl, and then Bent Jensen, who was on the Danish team, but he kind of felt like he wasn't, he felt a little bit on the outside because he lived in the US, but he was on the Danish team. So it ended up that Carl and Bent and I, we hung out together a lot, and both of them are like stand-up comedians, so it was really a lot of fun. We had a great time and have been friends for life. And that's been one of the great things about, I mean, competing like that is you meet people, and everybody seems to stay in the sport, so you end up with so many lifelong friends. And I think that's one of the really special things about our sport, is unlike other sports, you know, where there's a lot more of a turnover, we all kind of seem to just stay in it forever. I mean, you never hear of anybody saying, oh, I'm going to retire next year. I mean, when did you ever hear any horse person say that? Don't, right? I mean, I can't imagine ever retiring unless I would be forced to.
We were with a 91-year-old woman last weekend.
Yeah.
And she was so sad because she was having to retire her horse, and she's still riding, and she had to find another one.
91?
91, another 87-year-old lady sat down, and they had a conversation about the riding. The 87-year-old was still riding.
Really?
Isn't that inspiring?
It's great. No,
yeah.
it's really wonderful, and I think that's really unique in our sport. I mean, I have so many friends in the sport that I've known for anywhere from 20 to 30 years, and that makes it, I mean, you really feel like you belong to a family. It becomes your family. In my case, you know, my family is in Denmark, so I mean, I still see them and all that, but I have so many friends here that I'm so close with, and we all know each other very well. That also goes for the judging family, you know, having judged for so many years, we spend so much time together with, I mean, dinners and stuff like that, that we really become very good friends too. So it's a very special sport.
I just had a great idea listening to you talk about the elderly women who are still alive. We've got the U25 program, right? Under 25. Why don't we start an O65 program for over 65? And you'd probably fill the classes.
Over 85.
Yeah, you just got to get somebody to fund it.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, see, there you go.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Well, you do have classes. You do have classes for over a certain, don't you?
No, they don't.
No?
Yeah, the Century Ride.
Yeah, you're the Century Ride.
That's about it.
But then for USDF awards you do too, right? Yes, you do. What is it called? Yeah. Master something. Yeah, see, there you go. There you go. But even I go over across the street a lot at Palm Beach Equine, and so many of you know, top trainers from around come over there because there are so many riders over there, and you see like Volker Moritz, I don't know if you know him, he still comes over, and he's got to be, yeah, I don't know, at least late 70s at least, if not more. He retired from judging quite a while ago, but he's still coaching. I mean, there's so many out there that are coaching even into their 80s, so I think that's pretty cool. It is, yeah, it really is. It is a great sport. It is. And of course the horses Yeah, no, it is. It is.
It's something that's in your blood and you're just...
It is, absolutely, yeah. No, it is.
Walk away and you have to figure
No.
out how to, no matter what age, to include it.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, definitely, yeah.
That connects all of us.
Yeah, I can't imagine not doing, I mean, this is like my life. Yeah, and I can't imagine retiring. I mean, I would, if I won the lottery tomorrow, I'd still be doing what I'm doing. Are you? Michelle is going to say something.
Are you good?
I'm good. Any more questions, anybody? Oh, you did.
Oh, I was just going to ask you to kind of explain what defines developing in terms of who is it? Is it horses with certain scores? Do they have to be certain ages?
Well, that's what I was saying earlier. I mean, it really has to be something that's really looking like it could be a potential, you know, top combination at some point. Well, if you would actually have to, sorry, you have to go on the website because there are specific things in there, okay? And it's like a page long and I can't just repeat it. But look it up, and then if you think you have something really okay, yeah, you can always apply for those sessions and send in videos and stuff, and then from there they get picked. But there are certain requirements for sure. But you have to. There's a lot of different ways that you could get into it if you wanted to. And I also do a lot of talent scouting at the shows, like I said, too. And sometimes I'll say, you know, you should maybe apply. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you.